An old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. You fool me, we can't get fooled again.
Should I do a little toot toot? No, that wasn't it. It's too high. The Shit Show Express is taking off. Woo! Let's go. Hello, beautiful people. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. Welcome back to Heart Talks Podcast. It is the 7th episode, and this is the last installment in our conspiracy saga of the most wealthy and powerful families who rule the world. Thank God. And I gotta be honest, friends, I'm pretty stoked it's the last episode on this topic because I've had it about up to here reading about all these rich, greedy white men who control our economy and governments. Am I right? I'm right. It's been a little isolating and a little frustrating because in the depths of all this research, I got to feeling a bit depressed and helpless, if you will. I mean, after learning about the very real control and power that these crazy kooks have over our money, politicians, and our societies, and how the likelihood of them all being part of this one world banking order cartel is very high, it just made me feel like, how can we ever change this? You know? I suppose I found a little solace in remembering the first steps towards change is talking about it, like my daddy always said, but here we are. So my hope is that these episodes open up your minds to questioning everything, to create a community, a safe space for sharing, learning, unlearning, to incite change. So it may come, it's a good thing to question things because something's got to give, you guys. These families who own everything suck big stanky balls. I'm sick of living under the thumb and financial pressure of these mega corporations who make all the laws and price tags as they go, aka these rich families. We all now know. You're welcome. They all own the country. Yes. But before I go off the rails, fear not, my little aliens, because this episode is going to be good. I certainly did not save the least for last. And in some radical ways, this family ties into our next episode's topic, which is actually pretty rad. Just remember, before we dive into today's rabbit hole, here at Heart Talks, we treat all conspiracies as such, as many have never been confirmed or denied. But I think by this point, I can just throw this disclaimer out the window because this conspiracy that I've been talking about, it's real. Okay? Debate me at hearttalkswithbnh@gmail.com. But that's just me. Even though statistics do say 70% of the conspiracies you hear about turn out to be true, however you filter the following information is totally up to you. Ain't that beautiful? Golf claps. Yay. Come on, yay. I think that was my quickest intro ever, minus my TED Talk. But hey, that's what we're here for. Now, getting into the episode. With the previous families, we've discussed their uprise to power, how they manipulate the market, monopolies, murder, etc. But I've only glossed over how they've played puppet master over many, many politicians over the years, and how these people exert this mystical, maniacal power over our governments. So today, this episode is going to be a shiny, bleeping example of how the puppeteers are able to puppet. All right, Pinocchio? Say that 5 times fast. Oh, yeah. Remember how all these guys are so powerful, they're able to buy out more than entire governments, like, I don't know, whole countries, like in the Rothschilds and Israel's case? Yeah. Well, we know you need godlike wealth to help with the power of persuasion. Yeah, make that shit happen. Help you form the greatest of connections. But imagine being born into a family of status, where moolah and connections are just built in. Sounds super nice, right? Yeah. Especially if you have relations to British royalty and to some of the most famous names throughout history. And this family we're talking about today, in some crazy way, they seem to be related to practically everyone. And everyone random that you can imagine too. Yeah. But we'll talk about that in the end. We know many presidential candidates were carefully selected and funded by a lot of these mega corporations, aka these families. That's what we've been talking about. We know this because they tried to put John D. Rockefeller Sr. in the presidential chair. Remember? But the guy declined because he didn't want the demotion. But in today's episode, you'll catch the flip side where the puppeteer was successful in getting their puppets in position of power. And this stuff isn't conspiracy, you guys. This part comes from a lot of declassified files and are facts. And friends, you all know their names. It's our 41st and 43rd presidents of the United States. These are not the first candidates people in power like the Rothschilds and Morgans as such were successful at getting into the Oval Office, but this family will be in the spotlight of today's episode as they too are one of the 13 bloodlines tied to the orchestration of the Illuminati, and they're a key benefactor to this cartel as a whole. They're big players. Welcome to the stage, the infamous Bush family. Bam, 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 bam. Another family who would make their billions off of guns and oil. Surprise, surprise. But before we can jump into George W., the president, if you're my age, of our childhoods, we gotta go back in time, guys, to weed out some of the really seedy details that have been buried. And I mean buried, okay? So let's start with George H. Walker. That's where the W comes in for good old W. And I like that W. He was the great maternal grandfather of George W. Bush. And by a young age, great-grandpappy was a president of a well-known St. Louis investment bank, and he later went on to be a Wall Street-based banking tycoon. But how he really made his money was through war profiteering. Shocker. Working alongside the House of Morgan. Whoa. A lot of cameos with these you'll see. But working alongside the House of Morgan, they purchased billions in arms and ammunitions to support Britain and France during World War I. How nice of him. He also saw the growing importance of oil, especially after the war in the 20s when they had to rebuild a bunch of oil fields. So guess who he buddied up next to? That Rockefeller guy. You could say Walker was definitely a minor league monopoly man himself. He was the director of 17 corporations, and he maintained properties and homes all around the country. One I have to highlight really quick. One property was a 10,000-acre hunting reserve in South Carolina, which the family said used to employ the most lovely black, air quotes, servants. So, side eye. Setting the tone for a whole lot of racism early on. Cool. Now we'll come back to this biggest swinging dick in a moment. Let's talk about W's paternal great-granddaddy, Yale graduate Samuel Bush, who's also worth mentioning because of his Rockefeller ties as well. But more than that, he went on to be the president of Ohio's Buckeye Steel Company. But prior to Samuel taking over the steel company, it was owned by Frank Rockefeller, who was a brother of King of Kerosene himself, oil tycoon, John D. Rockefeller Sr. Johnny D is just everywhere. Oh, still thrusting my fists up for that guy. That sounded really bad. Samuel Bush and Rockefeller Sr. went on to have a great business friendship. Cute. As the two worked closely together with E.H. Harriman, another really elite family name who I'm not going to cover. Y'all can look those guys up. They're just as kooky, but he was a railroad and later Wall Street mogul as well. And like Walker, Samuel grew his fortune by rubbing shoulders with the right families. Because back in that day, it was all about who you knew and striking the iron while it was hot, right? Yeah. Now, pop quiz. Who remembers who created dynamite? Or who, honed in on that market? Yes. The people who are still poisoning us today. Episode 2's The DuPont Family. Boo. Y'all are so smart. Samuel Bush gets rich during the First World War because he partners with the DuPonts to start producing small arms and to get the best prices for explosives on the market. Yay. Together, they helped America dominate. So sweet and patriotic. The families actually made millions, though, so isn't that sweet? Something else I was thinking about is, isn't it crazy to think that before either of our former presidents were even born, they were already billionaires? I mean, wow. They're off to a great start. But the modern day conspiracies really started with Prescott Sheldon Bush. What a name. This grandpappy was a douche canoe, to put it lightly. Born May 1895, supposedly the guy was a 6-foot, 4-inch charmer with a rich singing voice. But I got more of a rich, racist, righteous, entitled, evil man vibe right off the bat. And you know what they say about trusting your intuition? Oh yeah, get ready for a lot of Nazis. Prescott married Dorothy Walker in 1901. See, that's how these families come together. Two people meet or are forced together in these scenarios. Probs do a little seance before mashing up some parts and bam! Woo doggy! You not only get one, but 2 presidents in your family bloodline. I'll take the blood of that baby now, Dorothy. Yeah. These 2 kids were arranged to be married, which was like, hey girl, hey. Because not only did P. Bushy come from money and already shiny last name, but he married into a family that also had buttloads of money and a whole lot of influence. So it was like a pretty epic transaction. Marriage.
Marriage is what brings us together today.
Name that movie. Now, Prescott is considered the founder of the Bush political dynasty. He was a senator, eye rolls, and was even considered a potential presidential candidate, which by the end of him, we will all agree that thank God he never was, because America probably would have ended up a lot like Nazi Germany. But like his father, Samuel, his son, George, and his grandson, George W., you'll see a trend, Prescott also went to Yale because they were all members of this secretive and influential Skull and Bones Society. Google it. Totally real. Cloaks and all. Oh, I have a cloak. Let me put mine on. Cloaks and all, y'all. And no, it's not a party frat or a fraternity that likes to serve its community as it tries to appear. It's like literally known as, quote, this is quote, brotherhood of death. So if they are doing keg stands, it's probably with goat blood. Oh yeah, Morning Star, party on. I don't know. But no, they're up to no good. Just no good. And they're very choosy about who they invite in. So I'm never going to know what they do there, but we can suspect. But to become a member, you have to be of like high and rich status, or you have to be legacied in, meaning a family member before you was a member. So you kind of have no choice but to follow into these footsteps. And now let's play a little devil's advocate for a second, because imagine the pressure as a kid if you were like born into one of these families or a cult, you know? Could you imagine growing up and being like, wow, Ma, I don't want to be in a cult. And she just slaps you with Jimmy. You don't be selfish now. 6 generations before you have done it, all will be well after your satanic baptism or whatever they do. But like, I guess that, I don't know. Like, I guess that'd be your normal. You wouldn't know right from wrong, but I don't know. As I say that, as I try to like justify that in my mind, I'm still not convinced. Like, I'm sure you realize what you're partaking in can't be normal, right? Like, we're all born with some moral compass, right? Like, you'd have to know this shit's weird, right? I can't get lost in those perspective shifts because, like, what the hell would that be like? Imagine scary, like, if you're aware, yeah. Right into the show if you were born in a cult. Like, first of all, are you okay? Second, tell me what's up because I am so curious. Anyway, if being in a satanic fraternity doesn't freak you out, or if that ain't already a big blood red flag on P. Bushy's character, here you go. P. Bushy's a slime bag. In The Guardian, I found a reputable news source. I found an article titled, "How Bush's Grandfather Helped Hitler's Rise to Power." Yeah, I know. This article was written in 2004 by Betsy Reed, so it's not like this information is new. But why didn't I ever hear about this? In a compelling paragraph from this article, quote, "Late U.S. Senator Prescott Bush was a director and shareholder of companies that not only profited from World War II, but were the direct financial backers of Nazi Germany," end quote. Yeah, like mic drop. Again, why didn't we know about this before voting for either of these guys to run our country? IDK, great question. Probs because they were handpicked by the Rothschilds and those sorts of people to maintain power to accomplish their greedy biddings for them. No, that can't be it. No. But this information, okay, this information was withheld from the public for over 60 years. These declassified files show that even after America had entered into the war, Prescott worked for and profited from companies closely involved with the very German businesses that financed Hitler's rise to power. These documents covering the Bush Nazi affiliations were only declassified in 2001. Trying not to yell, but are you pissed yet? Because I was. Now, I gotta get readjusted. Here's the skinny. This part is not conspiracy either, you guys. This information came directly from declassified files from the United States government, okay? So, please, if I get any emails saying the Bushes were never affiliated with the Nazi Party, or they only were in some weird third or fourth party way, no, just know that's bullshit. Great. And also, they knew exactly what they were involved in, and they absolutely were affiliated by how much they profited from the war alone, right? Alone. I like that. It's like from Dumb and Dumber. I like it a lot.
I like it a lot. I like you a lot.
But I don't like this a lot. No, I don't approve. Let me take my hood down for that because that is not Wookiee vibes. We do not approve. God damn it. I need some water. Hold on. I was dying. But what was I saying? Yeah, they literally would have had to have known, right? Where else is this infusion of money coming from? And like, you own the freaking company. You know, most people know where their money is coming and going from. Yes? Yes? Cool. I thought so. But early in 1924, Hendrik J. Quoven, the managing director of Bank Voorhandel in Scheepvaart, traveled to New York to meet the George Herbert Walker, W's great maternal grandpappy, remember, and the Harriman brothers, that other elite family I mentioned. Now, together they established this awesome banking entity called the Union Banking Corporation, or UBC for short. And it's going to come up a lot. So just remember, UBC belongs to the Bushes, and so does BBH Brown Brother Harriman Group. Yes. Later in 1924, Walker also decided to give his new son-in-law, P. Bushy, that big break. Which, why? Walker made Bush a vice president of Harriman & Co., which was a big deal because, yeah, that was a huge company at the time. And I believe still is. It's also worth mentioning that Prescott's new office employed many of his homeboys from Yale, many who were also members of the Skull and Bones Society, many who would partner or be the face for Prescott's backdoor business deals later on. Now, the firm Union Banking Corporation, UBC, and the Bush's Brown Brothers Harriman Investment Bank would later act as a U.S. banking base for the German industrialist Fritz Thyssen, who was arguably Hitler's greatest financer. And they helped protect his American assets. Yeah. See, as the German economy recovered through the mid to late 20s after World War I, many American companies invested in German companies to help rebuild the country's economy, which is still so stupid to me because why can't we use that kind of ingenuity on our own economy, considering something was about to happen at the same time in the U.S.? Like, I don't know, that little Great Depression that took place, but yeah, whatever. Walker and Harriman's UBC took extreme advantage of recovering the German economy, and they sold over $50 million worth of German bonds to American investors who profited enormously from the economic boom in Germany. So to do business over in Germany, it was not technically illegal even after the beginning of World War II. That is until the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. That's when America was forced into the war and American government made it illegal under Trading with the Enemy Act. Of course, that didn't seem to apply with guns or oil because, as we know, most of our monopoly men get rich during the 6-year conflict. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's skip across the Pacific Pond really quick and properly introduce this fascist dreamboat. Fritz Thyssen. By 1926, this Fritz Thyssen inherited the largest industrial monopoly in Europe. This dude was kind of like Germany's equivalent of J.P. Morgan at the time. He quickly created the United Steel Works, or USW for short, the biggest industrial conglomerate in German history. Thyssen partnered with Friedrich Flick, who owned coal and steel industries throughout Germany and Poland. One of the primary motivations for Thyssen and Flick's massive steel and coal merger early on was to suppress new labor and new radical socialist movements. Because after hearing Adolf Hitler speak for the first time at a rally, Thyssen said he became mesmerized by the young dictator. Yeah, we don't like him. Get new heroes. Get new heroes.
Ferris Bueller, you're my hero.
But to give you context, Thyssen is the one who bought the Brown House for Adolf Hitler, which went on to be the Nazi Party's headquarters in Germany. Okay? That's how close those homies were. Probably touching tips and everything. Probably weird blood brothers or something. I don't know. He believed in Hitler's air quotes cause and devoted his life and fortune to him. And it wasn't just funding Hitler's rise to power, you guys. It was funding Hitler's war itself, the concentration camps, the consent and backing to the murder of millions of Jewish people. Everything. Thyssen officially joined the Nazi Party in December 1931, and he admits to backing Hitler in his autobiography, stating, quote, "I paid Hitler when the National Socialists were still a radical fringe party," end quote. So this hunk of love, Thyssen, supported them from the beginning. Not a great guy. Now, back to P. Bushy. When Walker hired his son-in-law Bush, he did it because he and Harriman and all those other big dogs already had business with the Thysons over in Germany, helping rebuild their economy, remember? So it didn't hurt that a huge recession was happening at the same time here in America. And everyone needed a little back scratching at the same time, you know? During the Great Depression, Harriman and Co. got rocked. And to mitigate further risks, the following year, Harriman and Co. merged with the London firm Brown and Shipley. Brown and Shipley kept its name, but Harriman and Co. changed its name to Brown Brothers Harriman, or BBH. And this is where this evil, corrupt entity comes in, the largest investment bank in the world at the time. Then Averell Harriman and Prescott Bush reestablished a holding company called the Harriman 15 Corporation. And there lies one of the many companies Bush and Harriman had held stock in and for the Consolidated Silesian Steel Company owned by Flick and Thyssen. Sorry, I know it's a lot of names, but they all tie in together, so try and hang with me. So with the uptick in workloads and mergers all across the board, Walker especially needed Prescott to help him supervise this new Thyssen and Flick United Steelworks because it was big freaking business for them. USW was a conglomerate over many, many industrial complexes in Europe. The largest contributor to Thyssen and Flick's USW empire was that Consolidated Silesian Steel Company I just mentioned, and the Upper Silesian Coal and Steel Company located in the Silesian section of Poland, which is important to remember because that's where the first invasions in World War II took place. Thyssen and Flick paid Bush and Walker generously to take on the enormity of their conglomerate's holdings, but remember the names of these companies because they will come up. Oh, yes, they will. By the late 1930s, Prescott's Union Banking Corporation became a prime business partner to Thyssen. The tension started to come to a head as war seemed imminent, but before they could blast off from the genocidal starting lines, Thyssen was slapped with a problem. Hitler's policy became known worldwide, what he aimed to do. Suddenly, Thyssen's assets were frozen, and he was unable to throw any more money at his girlfriend, Adolf. But Thyssen figured he'd just keep moving around his money. And that's what a lot of these families do. They spread it out as much as they can. Smart. Diversify it. Camouflage it. But call it karma. His assets kept getting seized. So he starts thinking he needs to hit up his American ally to help him shuffle around his fortune to be able to continue funding Hitler and the f***ing Holocaust. Thyssen figured if Nazi Germany's backing was coming from underneath America's own nose, they wouldn't notice as quickly, that is. So who do you think Thyssen calls on to help prolong Hitler's terror? Union Banking Corporation, UBC, owned and directed by Prescott Bush. Not a good look, P. Bushy. Bush was on this board that formed part of a multinational network of front or shell companies to allow Thyssen to keep moving his assets around the world. Then came kickoff time with the German invasion of Poland in 1939. Fast forward 6 days after Pearl Harbor and the U.S. declaration of the war at the end of 1941. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, Secretary of the Treasury Henry Morgenthau, and U.S. Attorney General Francis Biddle signed the Trading with the Enemy Act, which banned any business interests with the U.S. enemies of war. So this is where their business became illegal AF. Prescott Bush continued with business as usual anyway. He didn't care that nearly 2,500 Americans, his own countrymen and women, were ambushed. He had no regard for life. He had his eyes set on one thing: money. The Bushes aided the Nazi invasion of Europe and supplied millions of dollars in resources for weaponry that would eventually be turned on American soldiers in combat against Germany. UBC also bought and shipped millions of dollars worth of gold, fuel, steel, coal, and U.S. Treasury bonds. What are those doing in there? To Germany. By October 20th, 1942, the U.S. government had had enough of Prescott Bush and his Nazi business arrangements with Fritz Thyssen. And thank God, because over that summer, the New York Tribune had exposed Prescott Bush and Fritz Thyssen, who the Tribune dubbed Hitler's Angels. Gross. When the U.S. government saw Union Banking Corporation's books, they found out that Bush's bank and its shareholders, quote, are held for the benefit of members of the Thyssen family and is property of nationals of a designated enemy country, end quote. Or in layman's terms, hell yeah, they got rich off of war and helping Hitler, okay? The UBC books also revealed the myriad of money funneling in and out from Thyssen's many non-existent holding companies. And the government realized that Union Banking Corporation was just the tip of the iceberg. On November 17th, 1942, the U.S. government took over the Silesian American Corporation, and they charged Prescott Bush with violating the Trading with the Enemy Act. But they did not prosecute because of a technicality. Since the companies were allowed to operate within the government alien property custodian office, with the catch, no aiding of the Nazis, they couldn't prove without unreasonable doubt that Prescott was aware of these transactions. But I call complete bullshit, okay? And apparently I am not the only one. John Loftus, a former U.S. attorney who prosecuted Nazi war criminals in the 70s, said, quote, at various times, the Bush family has tried to spin it, saying Consolidated Silesian Steel Company, CSSC, was owned by a Dutch bank, and it wasn't until the Nazis took over Holland that they realized that now the Nazis controlled the apparent company, and that is why the Bush supporters claim when the war was over, they got their money back. Both the American Treasury investigators and the intelligence investigations in Europe completely belie that. It's absolute horseshit. They always knew who the ultimate beneficiaries were, end quote. Yes, John Loftus, thank you for saying it for us all in the back. It is horseshit.
What?
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit. A bullshit.
In 1943, while still owning his stock, Prescott Bush resigned from UBC and even helped raise money for dozens of war-related causes as chairman of the National War Fund to paint himself in a better light, like we've seen many of these Scrooges do. However, after the war, the Dutch government began their own investigations. They started looking into the books of Bank voor Handel en Scheepvaart. Remember, this is the main bank from the beginning that partnered with Bush's father-in-law's bank to create the UBC. Yeah. When they discovered the transaction papers of the Silesian American Corporation, they began asking the bank manager, H.K. Quoven, a lot of questions. And Quoven acted shocked at the discovery, but then soon traveled to New York to inform P. Bushy. And then, according to Dutch intelligence, Quoven met with Prescott soon after Christmas 1947. Then 2 weeks later, Quoven apparently died of, air quotes, a heart attack. Suspicious. By 1948, Fritz Thyssen's life was in ruins. After having a falling out with his beloved Hitler, he was jailed by the Nazis, then released, and then he was jailed by the Allies, where he was interrogated extensively. Which, I mean, karma again. Thyssen and Flick were ordered to pay reparations and serve time in prison for their atrocious crimes against humanity. By 1950, Prescott Bush sold his UBC stocks, trying to put as much distance between him and the ordeal as possible. On February 8th, 1951, Fritz Thyssen dies bitterly. That's what I read. Died bitterly in Argentina at the age of 78. And he had a lot to say. He was very unhappy about how he was treated in his later years. But come on, dude. Come on. But when Thyssen died, the alien property custodian released the assets of the Union Banking Corporation and Brown Brothers Harriman. The remaining stockholders cashed in their stocks quietly, and they liquidated the rest of UBC's blood money. Prescott Bush received $1.5 million for his share in UBC, and another $1.7 million for his share in BBH. That money enabled Bush to help his son, George Herbert Walker, who's also a douche canoe, to set up his first royalty firm called Overbuy Development Company that same freaking year. It was also helpful when Prescott Bush left the business world to enter the public arena in 1952. He had a successful senatorial campaign in Connecticut. Now, the debate over Prescott Bush's involvement came out during grandson George W. Bush's presidency. It was actually during his re-election campaign, to be exact. But there's still a steady stream of internet chatter about the Bush-Nazi connection today. But obviously, we know it didn't inflict George W.'s presidency or re-election campaign too much, or probably not even at all, because he went on to serve another term. So that's just what I read, because this article was published in like 2005 during his re-election. But what does that say? Even if we didn't have social media or internet like we do today back in 2004, tabloids had this story plastered everywhere at first. And then it was like the freaking Mandela effect, because you couldn't find the story anywhere. It must be nice to be besties with all the families who literally control all the media and press. But fear not, my little mushies. That's not all. I did some more digging. The most tantalizing part of this whole story remains shrouded in mystery. And this part can't technically be proven. I mean, I think it could be technically proven if they'd open up and disclose the full spectrum of these documents, but I don't know. But there's the connection between Prescott Bush, Thyssen, Consolidated Silesian Steel Company, and Auschwitz. Remember Thyssen's partner in United Steel Works, Friedrich Flick? Well, Flick's plants in Poland made heavy use of slave labor from the concentration camps in Poland. According to New York Times article published March 18th, 1934, Flick owned only 2/3 of CSSC, while he said, quote, American interests held the rest. Silesia was quickly made part of the German Reich after the invasion, but while Polish factories were seized by the Nazis, those belonging to the still neutral Americans and some other nationals were treated more carefully, as Hitler was kind of crossing his stupid little fingers that the U.S. was going to sit the war out, or at least be a neutral country. So nearly 60 years after this tragedy, 2 of the Holocaust survivors from Auschwitz bravely came forward, and they claimed they were used as slave laborers during their stay at Auschwitz concentration camp to work at CSSC. Kurt Julius Goldstein and Peter Gingold began a class action suit in America in 2001, suing the U.S. government and the Bush family for a total amount of $40 billion in compensation, claiming both materially benefited from Auschwitz slave labor during the Second World War. But unfortunately, the case was thrown out by Judge Rosemary Collier on the grounds that the government cannot be held liable under the principle of state sovereignty. Which, I mean, are you freaking kidding me? John Leisman, one of the lawyers for the survivors, said, quote, President Bush withdrew President Bill Clinton's signature from the treaty that founded the court not only to protect Americans, but to also protect himself and his family, end quote. This guy Leisman also argued that, genocide-related cases are covered by international law, which does hold governments accountable for their actions. He claimed this judge's ruling was invalid as no hearing ever took place. But unfortunately, that's where it ended. No compensation for the survivors, no accountability from the Bushes or our government. So the truth was even worse. Not only was Prescott Bush's UBC holding Nazi Germany's assets or making it accessible to them, not only was UBC shoveling money, gold, arms, oil at the Nazi party, but they were also allegedly using people from concentration camps as, air quotes, workers to cut costs? Are you f***ing kidding me? And they weren't held liable? What? It's awful. It's awful. Files on the Bush's Nazi involvement was again hidden from the people for over 60 years. So imagine what else has been hidden from us. And classified documents. Which begs the question, why is our government protecting people like these if they are not protecting themselves? It's such bullshit. You know, these files were probably kept top secret so the puppeteers could keep putting members of this family back into power. I believe it. They probably figured by the time that these files were declassified in like 2001, it'd be far enough removed from everybody's hearts, or nobody would pay enough attention. The people would just, forget about the intentional murder of approximately 6 million European Jews. But no. It more became, by then, the Bushes will be powerful enough to butter over the history and lawsuits and the entire infraction completely. Because that's exactly how it seemed to play out. Which is so awful, there aren't even words. You can't trust your government. Everything is a scheme. And if you're thinking, well, Alicia, it was just money. It's not like they were the ones ripping people from their homes and throwing them into gas chambers. Let me stop you right there. What do you need to buy such things like gas and oil or trucks or food for your fascist soldiers, fuel for your tanks and bombers? Fucking money. Without the funding, Hitler could have never accomplished the atrocities that he did. These financial backers are just as much to blame as Adolf Hitler himself. I said it. Attorney John Loftus also argued that the late Senator Prescott Bush's actions should have absolutely been grounds for prosecution for giving aid and comfort to the enemy, which you guys, oh my gosh, I absolutely believe that he should have been. Prescott Bush should have been prosecuted. He should have served time. But he was a senator instead. And then he had a vice president and a president's son and president grandson. It doesn't make sense. Why? Why did we let him get away with this? Why are these kinds of people in power? Why do we continue to let these people be in power? He absolutely should have served time. But he didn't. Instead, he lived out a lavish lifestyle. Reading, making more misogynistic prejudice spawn. And while Prescott already came from money, like I said, it has been suggested that the riches Prescott made from these air quotes dealings throughout WW2, World War II, it helped solidify the Bush family fortune today. He did die of cancer, but I don't really care. I think that's karma too. And I would be remiss if I didn't say this either. Go Google Hitler's death. He deserves his own episode in the sense that the skull that we have on file that's supposed to be his, or on file, we'll just call it on file, forensic files. The skull that we have was his, it's a female's. Anthropologists found the skull was a female's. So we have no physical evidence that Hitler shot and killed himself and died. And, there's a lot of conspiracy theories saying that there's active Nazi bases up and running down in Antarctica, and maybe he hopped on a boat, skipped town, laid low for the rest of his life in like Argentina, but I don't know. I just had to throw that in. Maybe I'll do an episode about him one day when I get over my PTSD from these douchebags. But yeah, P. Bushy, not a good guy. Not a good guy. Next week, I know, cliffhanger, part 2 on the Bush-Saddam Hussein connections and the lives of our 41st and 43rd presidents. We'll see that the apples don't fall very far from the trees. If you enjoyed this episode and appreciate what I've been talking about so far, go ahead and smash that like and subscribe button. If you want to link up, share some stories, or if you have any questions, you can find the podcast on Instagram or Facebook at Hard Talks Podcast, with more links in my bios. As always, you guys, don't be mad. It's cliffhanger. It's going to be even better next week. A lot to cover. A lot. But I just appreciate you little shroomies for taking the time out of your busy days to expand your minds and to begin questioning everything, to think unlimited with me here. I love you all very much, and I'll see you next week for the conclusion. Cheers.